Thank you very much for having me present today. Really appreciate the opportunity. Just a little bit about myself. I'm not a station person by any means. I took that from the introduction of the marketing guy this morning. I started my life in a country town called Wickerpin, which is 350 odd k's southeast of Perth. I grew up on a farming community there and worked on the land doing wheat and sheep with a few cows. We pretended to do cattle. And unfortunately, along the way, the poor succession planning in farming happened, and I moved off and tried to do something else. And I went to a place called Kambalda, which anybody knows is just an hour south of Kalgoorlie. And I had a first aid certificate in my back pocket, and I worked there in the nickel mines. They just started introducing this thing called safety, and I started working there, and they introduced this thing in safety because they're killing one person a month in a company called Western Mining at that point in time. Anyway, kind of time passed and I moved on from Kambalda and I went back to Perth, worked as an orderly in the hospital system in Perth. Anyway, I was working there and I saw what the RNs did, or the registered nurses, and I thought, you know what, I reckon I could give that a go. So back to school I go, finished my degree, become a registered nurse and worked in the hospital systems for 10 years. While I was doing that though, this safety thing kept in the back of my head, and I thought, oh well, you reckon, you know, I don't really particularly want to be a nurse for the rest of my life, I'll do this safety thing. So I went back to school, got my degree and been working in safety for 20 years since. Now the reason why I tell you that story is because I don't come from this, an educated, well-educated background. Went to school in a local primary school with 100 kids, went to a district high school, went to Narrogin Ag School, in a boarding school, went to Muresk during the period of time there, because I thought agriculture was going to be this thing, but you know, this safety in agriculture has got to come along with me. So when I try and talk about safety, I try to keep it simple and straightforward, because this is the easiest way everybody understands safety. So today I'm going to be giving this talk about the importance of safety, particularly in relation to workers' comp within the industry. I thought, to be honest, I must admit I was a bit jaded to come down. I thought, oh, it's probably not going to be the most favourite topic that anybody wants to listen to. So thank you for all staying and attending. But I was pleased to hear that, you know, as the themes of the day has rolled on, this is quite a topical topic. So I'm pleased to be able to present this to you. So the aim of the presentation is to navigate the compliance of safety management effectively, with the bottom line of trying to control your workers' comp costs. Let's see how I go with this. So, the importance of managing safety. Why do we need to do that? So the reality is we have a lot of laws that attach to managing workplaces. And when we do this, the law mandates responsibilities to certain stakeholders. And the idea of that law is to try and protect workers. Now we know this is around, and you guys have adopted this legislation for quite some period of time. And let's see if we go that way. There we go. And that's been around since 2011. So I'm not going to go into great detail about the law, all right? Because today's not really what the topic's about. But we know we've got an Act, regulations, and there's 29 codes of practice. What I'm going to talk about is how it's kind of set up, this law, from a broader point of view. So within the Work Health and Safety Act, there's actually 4 levels of responsibility that sit there. Number 1 relates to the top line. It's what's called PCBU, which is an odd term, but essentially it's the business. It's the organisation, it's the company. Whatever that entity looks like, it's called the PCBU. And that's the operating part of that. Second part of this is called what we call is the corporate officers section, which is the officer's duty of care, which is very different to any other sorts of legislation, because it actually highlights a group of people that are responsible for implementing safety within the PCBU. And I'll explain a little bit as we go along with an example further on. Underneath that we have the worker duty, so we're all workers, so we all have this duty. And lastly, we have this other section in green, which is others. So they're kind of like people, visitors, passers-by, road users, or anybody that's affected by our work. So going back to the main 2 components of the law, it relates to PCBUs and officers' duties. Now, when we break rules, we often have a financial penalty, and there's lots of discussions within the safety industry to say, well, is this really an effective way of managing it? But to be honest, from a government point of view and a law point of view, there's no other way to manage it. If you break the rules, to be honest, you'll get penalised. Generally how it works, there's no other avenues to do it. And examples of this are two that are recent, one's particularly related to here in the Northern Territory, and that relates to Vermilla Station. Most of you will probably be aware of the story attached to that. Unfortunately, somebody had their arm severely injured while they were installing fence posts. That company entered into what's called an enforceable undertaking for $200,000. And in that enforceable undertaking, they've set out a number of activities they're going to do, and I do believe part of it's going to be related to this association in trying to promote safety within the station industry. So that is the PCBU component of that. So the business has done something wrong, they've broken some rules, the WorkSafe NT have determined that that's the case, and they've entered into this agreement. The second one relates to the corporate offices. Now, you can see straight away that I've mentioned in there the Port of Auckland. Now, I know it has nothing to do with stations, though in this space, prosecutors have been trying to go after corporate offices for over 10 years, and they've been unsuccessful to this point in time. This is the first case in New Zealand because they have exactly the same legislation about what happens when a corporate officer fails to meet their duty. So the situation revolves around, they were shifting containers out of the port. The CEO knew that this was an issue, wanted to have a mechanised way of doing it, and just bear with me, fluffed around a bit, didn't do anything about it because he wanted to try and have this magical thing to do. He ended up not doing anything. A container fell and killed one of the workers on the port. Now, the port was found guilty and charged $500,000, though they successfully proved that the CEO didn't meet his responsibilities in managing that process. And so forth, he was fined personally that amount. And this is the difference. A PCBU is the business, so therefore the business cops the fine. Under a corporate officer type style, it is the personal corporate officer that meets that definition. All right? Now, why do I need to talk about that? Because the part of the law is about safety and how we manage that in that component. The second part of the cost related to safety comes from workers' comp. Now, we know that we must have workers' comp, and it is called workers' comp. It's not called employer comp. It is called workers' comp, and therefore it has quite some attachments to it, meaning that the worker will be, kind of a no-fault, no-blame kind of system. There's a number of determining factors that work out how we're going to determine what the costs will be of that. And number one factor is related to the nature of the work, the worker numbers, and of course your past claim history. What impacts on premiums is the frequency and the severity of the incidents that affect it. And industry performance also affects premium adjustments. So for this talk, I talked to one of the underwriters and said, well, okay, can you give us some general figures to give us some indication of what's really going on out there? So the underwriter experience is, the average claim cost is $45,000 for NT in stations. Now, believe it or not, that's slightly lower than the industries outside of the ag or the station area, which runs at $56,000. The frequency of claims, though, are 6 times higher than normal industries. So for the last 5 years, they've had 494 claims, and that's calculated at a claims rate of 1.9 claims per million, compared to 0.3 across the other industries. So let's go back. What are the determining costs for workers' comp? The nature of the work, workers' numbers, past claims. So this leads to the query that why I wanted to give this presentation, Because looking back, standing back and not being involved directly in the industry, but seeing where the trends are headed in relation to premiums and where are they headed. The average charge rate is approximately 14% of wages. It's more than 3 times higher than any other industry. Now, in my mind, when we think about that, it's kind of like, well, which way is the industry going? Because rates are climbing. They're not going backwards, they're going up. I've seen claims, charge rates for some stations at over 30%. Now, a lot of the themes today we were talking about relates to, trying to be profitable within an industry. Right? And this claim type of stuff comes off the bottom line for you guys. So the reality of it is, how do we make it important that we manage this, not only for an industry's sake, to get a decent rate, but more importantly, the people who work in it. So I went to Safe Work Australia and had a look at their data, and this was the most striking graph that I absolutely kind of blew my hat off. I don't wear one much, but yeah. So I'm not sure if anyone can understand really what the graph is saying, but if you look at the under 25-year-olds, 60% of all serious injuries occur there. It's quite staggering. All right? The issue that relates to claims within this age group is the severity of the claims, because they're often life-changing. And the reason why I get a bit emotional about it is because often you get to see the end result. Yeah. Right? The unfortunate part of my role is often you get to see the worst case of it. I'll move on in a minute. And you see the tragedy that occurs within farming family when they've either lost a loved one or they've lost a worker that has been part of the family for ages. They've all grown up together. And this part really is the part that upsets me the most. Oh, sorry about this, guys. So, the other concern about this is when we look at the number of fatalities. And as you can see, we move past the 25-year-olds, and if we go into a serious injury there and you're over 25, it's often fatal. So these are the kinds of statistics that we're trying to deal with. So my thoughts today were related to, well, how can I help this industry look at changing that? Right? Because we can all go, you can buy a safety system, but the challenge, having worked with this industry for quite some time, is it often goes in the bottom shelf, gathers a lot of dust, and then leaves it, not to be seen again. Right? So I've kind of broken it into these focus areas, right? So when we look at safety from this point of view, it kind of changes how we look at it, rather than seeing it from, oh, mate, it's just a bunch of documents. I just want to get on with what I need to do. I don't need to, what do I need to do this stuff for? Right? So when we talk about safety, first thing we often think about, and this goes on from the great session that came from the pilot session before. The question was asked right at the end, how do we change the industry? And number one, it comes down to leadership. Right? Because leadership's one of the most important spaces in here. It comes down to engagement and competency. It comes down to risk management and what kind of processes we have in place. So, leadership. It's often, touted around a lot. What does it really mean for a station to have leadership in there? Right? So leadership's different than management. Management's about focusing on planning and organising and directing things to get done. But when we talk about leadership, it's about setting the right example. I'm often go back to a story, and one of the clients is in the room. And I did the presentation. They'd had a serious incident occur on the station, and so we had to have the discussion about wearing helmets. And so the owner of the station, "You mean what? I have to wear a helmet when I drive to the house down to the workshop?" Well, the answer is yes. "Oh, why do I have to do that?" Because if your workers, see that you're not wearing the helmet, then it's okay for me to not wear the helmet. So leadership becomes the most vital thing that we have in providing what is expected for safety. It's about coaching, right? Providing competencies about leadership. So when we have somebody in charge of a group of people, and often it's young people that have come up to the industry for their either gap experience or it could be backpackers. These people are here for the excitement and the adventure, but really have no understanding of how to deal with a Mickey ball in a set of yards. Right? How do we show that leadership? How do we provide that? Do we provide coaching and training for our people to say, well, okay, this is the minimum standard. When you go out to work, you wear boots. And we integrate safety into our management style things, how we do things. So it's not separate, it's not different, it's just part of how we do things. And for those that do well at it, we provide a reward and recognition of that. Now, it doesn't have to be a monetary value. People can work out what that means, but show that that's what you would like and encourage it, because we all like reward and recognition of how we do things. Engagement. Is the safety process that you have engaged within your organisation understood by everybody? Often I'll go into a business and they'll do, yep, we've got everybody to do the induction. It took 30 minutes and I've got them all to sign off on their work instructions. 32 of them, they all signed them. All ready, all set to go. The worker's ready to go. Right? But no one read it. No one does anything with it. So do we understand what it means when we sign off on it? Do they know their responsibilities? Do they know that they're required to turn up to work sober? Right? Providing training, giving a priority on training. There's a stat that's come out now that remember all our challenges with ATVs, and now the side-by-sides have created a bit of an issue in farming community now. So I think in the last 12 months, unfortunately within Australia, we've had 14 fatalities related to side-by-sides. Right? So the query comes down to, is sufficient training being able to be provided on how to operate this type of equipment and providing, following the instructions by the manufacturers. So it's about providing resources, providing training, providing understanding of why you have to do it this way. Do we monitor and measure these things so that we know that they understand? And do we recognise constructively and challenging risk behaviours? So if somebody's not behaving in the manner that we want them to, do we do something about it? And do we take personal responsibility for our actions and behaviours? Again, by setting an example. The biggest area in this space is related to risk management. And it's not really a scary thing to do. It's pretty straightforward in one sense. Do people understand the tools that you want to use in related to risk management? Are we able to recognise the risks that were there? We know that working in a station is a risky industry, but it doesn't stop us from doing things. It's about how we manage it. What controls do we put into play? What actions do we do? And better still, do we tell everybody about how we want things done? It's very interesting. I was relating a story about how I learnt where to stand in the yards. It was about how well I was shouted at. If I stood in one place, I was shouted at a lot, so I learnt to stand somewhere else. And if I was standed there long enough, I obviously was in the right position to get everything to move forward. This often concept about understanding how we're taught and trained in a regular format so we understand what we're supposed to be able to do. Do we understand that risk management is a key focus for contractor management? Because yes, as a PCBU or as an employer, you're responsible for the contractors that you employ onto your station. Do we review and monitor our risks to make sure that they're under control, what we expect them to be? Do we understand the physical and psychosocial risks that we also face? The startling statistics that come out of New South Wales recently, that's going to show an 80% increase in psychosocial risks. They clearly put out there in the New South Wales system that there's not enough dollars in the system. I think they only had 85 cents in the dollar to cover the anticipated costs that it will be to manage psychosocial claims in New South Wales. Psychosocial claims will be coming to the station industry. So it's better to be on the front foot and understand what that means and how do we deal with that. Do we have a shared knowledge about our safety hazards from prior incidents, and do we share them with our team members so that they understand the learnings from those? Do we have a process of reporting hazards and risks and the potential safety issues when they're identified? And if you're in a leadership position, do we effectively assess and control the physical and the psychosocial hazards within the area of responsibility? Lastly, do we have a process or a safety system? And it doesn't really matter what you would like it to be, but be aware it needs to comply with the current safety laws. Do we have a process that manages safety? Do we provide communication? Do we provide training? Do we review what we're doing? And do we learn from incidents and use this knowledge to improve our practices to prevent reoccurrences? Are we open to change? Now, I've had some very interesting conversations throughout my period of time, and quite often the challenges are related to trying to get people to think about things differently and change, right? Because change is necessary for improvement, and safety is one of those components. It's about making sure that we understand what we're trying to do and keep it simple. Understand what are our main risks. Continuously be on the lookout for safer and more productive ways of working and communicating with potential issues. I was having quite a chat to the guy that has the crush out there as a demonstration, because one of those areas where significant issues occur is around getting cattle through the crush in a quick and timely manner for not only the animal but for the workers in that space. And the improvements in crush design have come such a long way and compared to when I first started working in safety in the industry. Are we diligent in maintaining our records? And this is probably not the greatest strength of everybody, right? But records are important because when it comes to the crunch time and you need to show people what you've done, we need to pull out the piece of paper or your computer safety system that you have on your desktop. Because this shows and demonstrates to the regulator what you've done to manage safety. Because really, at the end of the day, we're trying to protect the business or demonstrate what we're doing. And if we're in a leadership position, ensure that the relevant elements of the safety system are implemented for what you can do. Take the time to understand what the indicators are on performance. And often I always promote the positive things rather than trying to measure the number of injuries. So safety can impact on your premiums, because if we have a good safety process, we get a reduction in workplace incidents and workers' comp claims. Now, you can pretty easily change, the amount of claims you have. Sure, you just don't report them. It's pretty easy, just don't let anybody know. It's all good. But unfortunately, I've been on the other side of that when somebody gets caught out, and it does take years to untangle and very, very costly. Because what we're trying to aim for is some lower premiums and enhanced safety performance. So one of the things that they asked me to do was provide some experiences that I've had along the way, and this graph here is one of my longest clients I've had. I had them for 19 years and I only lost them because they decided to engage somebody in-house. And what it shows is the journey. It's not linear, it's not perfect. It's one of those things that went along in sort of lumps and bumps, if I can put it properly. The green bar relates to the costs of workers' comp. And as you can see in the beginning, it was kind of high and then it was kind of low and kind of high and kind of low and a little bit all over the place. The yellow line that's there is the number of incidents that were reported by the workplace. And as you can see, as it got towards the bottom end, towards 2019, the green bars became lower, but the incident rate became higher. So the severity of the incidents were decreasing, though the number were not. And this is an important aspect to understand, because incident reporting is, I call it your friend, because we get to know what's actually going on and we get to learn how to fix things. But if we leave it in the sense of, I haven't got any incidents, so everything must be safe, it's kind of like it being, playing a bit of Russian roulette. So the savings we had for this company from 2014 onwards was $1 million a year on premiums. Second example. This is a new one. We've picked this one up. This is a station country in WA. We started with them in 23-24. And as you can see, they had a rate of 19% on wages. Projected for 25-26, we're down to 15%. So we're not quite an industry average at 14. And we're predicting 26-27 to be under industry rate by improving the safety systems within that organisation. So a cost-saving benefit for these guys is significant. Workers are safe, which is significant. Injuries are decreasing, which is again significant. So safety and workers' comp actually go well together, and they do have a major impact on premiums. So if you implement your safety management system, you will end up with fewer claims and lower premiums. You may not get lower incident rates, but you will have fewer claims because the severity won't be as strong. So a robust safety system leads to lower workplace incidents overall, or the severity of them. So the benefits, number one, safety. We want worker safety and well-being. So this is the most important aspect of implementing safety process, is making sure that our people are safe. For you guys though as well, your costs will be reduced because you've got a decrease in premium. And the moral reason for that is actually you're looking after people, because they're the most important asset that we have. So key takeaways, if I'd like you to take something with you. Prioritise safety and protect your workers because they are your greatest asset. Manage your risks, understand what they are and manage them. Communicate, communicate, communicate. I can't tell you enough about this. If we can talk about safety, farming, we just don't talk about this enough. We don't listen or hear the stories that go around. So we talk about safety, everybody gets to understand it. We don't have to be 100% specific about what we're talking about, so long as, from your point of view, you get across the message that it's important to you. Invest in safety for the long term, because it has some great benefits, and I've seen this time and time again in my 20 years. Not only does it reduce the costs, but it boosts morale, and you'll be surprised at how well people look at coming to work for you. And at the end, together, we can all build a safer and more sustainable station industry. Thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate that. And I'll catch you a bit later.